All right, let's
Thank you.
okay, we'll start. Okay, great. So happy holiday. So I wanted to cover some things tonight in terms of Sukkot and Chol Moed. So I guess first, let's start with the underlying idea behind Sukkot. You know, we have than all of the other holidays. In fact, it has more mitzvot than just about all the other holidays put together. Between the Aliyah Regel, going up to Jerusalem, the sacrifices that were brought, the sitting in the sukkah, the 4 different elements.
What happened? Hello?
Ricky?
Something happened.
Yeah,
Can someone hear? Could you hear me, guys? Can you hear me?
I could hear you, but I can't hear him.
Me too.
Okay, yeah, me too. Maybe
Hi,
something happened to
everyone.
the
Yeah, I
thing.
don't hear a thing.
I know, Jeanette, I can't see you, but I was smiling when you were talking.
Alrighty.
Really,
Oh,
Mabruk.
Sorry,
I'm so
I got
excited.
disconnected.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Barry. Oh, here's Ricky. I hear Ricky's voice. Did I hear him?
Do you hear me?
Yes,
did.
he's
You
back.
did, but it goes and comes.
Okay, we're back. Okay, alrighty, and recording, and we're back. Okay, great. Let me get rid of this one. Guys, so we're just having a little bit of a. Okay, let's try it again. I'm trying to get off this other one. So, okay, all right, I think we're okay now. We should be okay. Let me just kill this. Okay, great. Okay, so
Hold on.
I don't hear anything. Does anyone hear anything?
No, don't hear anything.
no.
He said so, and it went dead.
You muted?
okay, how are
Oh,
we doing
Sally,
now?
I see you.
Okay, can you hear me now? It keeps going. Can you guys hear me now?
Now we hear you, Ricky, right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a problem with the connection. I'm not sure why. So as we started to say, Sukkot has the most of all holidays in terms of mitzvot. And it goes very far and wide. There are several mitzvot that we do during Chol Moed as well, during the interim days. Back in the time of the temple, you'd have hundreds of thousands of people coming up to Jerusalem. There would be beautiful parties every night with these beautiful torch-lit ceremonies. Men were dancing, men and women used to meet. It was a great time of shidduchim. The holiday of Simchat Torah evolved over time. So it's it's the holiday, in fact. On top of that, the rabbis ascribed to it this concept of simcha, of happiness, that's disproportionately attached to this holiday. So the first thing I want to tackle is why. Why is Sukkot the holiday? Coming from Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, why would we say that it all lands in Sukkot? And what does it mean for us on a practical level? What do you guys think? We're a small group, so anybody who doesn't have noise, unmute, and let me know your thoughts. Any ideas?
Maybe because we all come in now clean,
Right.
giving up all our sins. Me.
Very all right. So we all perfect. We all come in clean. It's true, and that means that we're walking into a new setup, and this is the proving ground for that setup. This is the proving ground. Meaning, what did my Shabbat, my first Shabbat after Kippur, look like relative to the Shabbatot that I spent last year or for the last 10 years. So if I stand before God on Kippur and I make all these grand proclamations, which are great, and to Cynthia's point, my pleas and my prayers are received, then it means it's time to put them into action. So when I step into that first Shabbat after Kippur, my Shabbat should be slightly different. There should be more mitzvot that I keep. Maybe the meal goes a little.
What happened? The voice went, Ricky. I don't know what happened. Maybe my battery? No.
No.
No,
it seems like
Ricky,
he's
we
having
can't hear you.
internet issues.
Not my battery, right? Interesting.
No, it's
I wonder if it's the weather.
Yes,
maybe
that's
it's
what
the
it probably.
weather. That's what I was thinking. He's really right on the water, maybe.
It could be. Well, we had a terrible
Just wait for him.
before lightning, but right now it's not lightning.
Just wait. Wait for him to come back.
How long is this your session usually? We don't know, huh?
Oh, here I
About an
hear
hour.
Ricky.
Guys hear me? I'm losing it on
Now we do, Ricky.
I'm
We
losing
didn't
it.
for the
Okay,
last 5 minutes.
It's not working properly, so I'm going to do it on my phone.
You think it's the weather, Ricky?
Yeah, I think it
I do.
probably is. Okay, so
Okay.
here we want building from Yom Kippur. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us as much ground, as much fodder as possible on Sukkot to say, I'm going to engage mitzvah A, mitzvah B, mitzvah C. And what you want to be doing in this new opportunity, this new year of life, is engaging something more. So as a general point, we want to know that this is the time to take on more. So let's talk about some of those things as they relate to it. It's all women on the class tonight, so let's talk about some of those things. So we have, in terms of let's talk about the laws of Shabbat for women in particular, to enrich the table with their insight, and then it would be adding immeasurably to that table if women came with an idea on Torah, something they read, something they want to share, an idea of Hesed, and with the perspective being to enhance the knowledge base. Going further, it would be very beautiful if women could speak to a new mitzvah that they took on. So we have, in terms of Shabbat, for example, we have the softer mitzvot, the mitzvot of the conversation that takes place and the atmosphere that's provided. Of course, we have the more rigorous mitzvot of what we carry, what we don't carry, how we electricity and housekeeping and so on. So let's talk about those in the context of Sukkot, so that we can grab the gauntlet and take on maybe something, one or two new things to demonstrate, as Cynthia started to mention, that we're clean and we're moving to more. So on Sukkot, we have the great possibility of creating this thing called Moed. Moed means that I'm different during this day. Now, the differences can be explained for a man easily. The man has to sit in the sukkah, sleep in the sukkah, The man has to take the 4 minim, meaning the lulav and the etrog and so on. But what would you say would be the opportunity for a woman on Sukkot? What might she do? What do you say?
Invite
would
more
be-
people.
What's that?
Do a Devar Torah. Invite more people. I can't imagine.
Serve, serve,
Yeah,
serve
Yeah.
like the food in the sukkah.
Right, cook 4 meals.
right. Cook more meals, right? Cook
Because we've
more
been doing
meals.
that.
So it's
Invite more
interesting
people,
because
okay.
we say that a woman's efforts are greater than the man's efforts. And that's why she's not bound to sit in the sukkah, because her efforts in building the home and preparing the meals and so on are more important than the man's. So how does she enhance the holiday? Let's talk about a few specific things. If a woman brings a Dvar Torah to the table, it's fantastic. And these days, it's easy. We can go online. We're going to talk about a few things tonight that can be used. If a woman brings an act of chesed to the table, it's very valuable. Any idea, any new insight is important. And the point
Invite
is
a stranger.
inviting a stranger is very valuable, or a poor person, or an estranged family member with whom we want to make things better. So any effort at building, at growing, at demonstrating family values to our children and grandchildren is certainly important. Now, the woman also has an opportunity to learn Torah. Here, the people in this call, for example, are very engaged in learning Torah, typically in a class format. What would be great is for, as I mentioned, the woman to walk onto the table with her own book of Torah, open the page and read something. And as we've mentioned before, everything is in English and so on. So let's mention a few ideas that we can all bring to the table and demonstrate to Hashem that we're more, that we're growing, that we're engaging, learning on another level. We have this a beautiful idea in terms of Sukkot. It says that the Sukkot Hoshavti et Bnei Israel, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to put us in these. Ki b'Sukkot Hoshavti otam b'midbar, so that the Jewish people know that and remember that they were in these temporary huts in the desert. There are two explanations to this, and this is very, says that the temporary dwelling that the Jewish people were put in was literally huts that they were in the desert. The other rabbi counters and says, no, it wasn't huts. It was the clouds of glory that surrounded them side to side, top and bottom, front and back. So our rabbis tease out what's the difference between the two opinions. Rabbi Akiva, I believe, says that it's the clouds of glory that surrounded the Jewish people. And when we go into our temporary place, we're reminding ourselves that God gave us those clouds of glory to protect us, that were not permanent, that were there to give us a sense of security under his guidance and dominion. The Elazar, I believe, is the one who says that no, it wasn't clouds of glory at all. It may have been reversed between the two rabbis. It wasn't clouds of glory at all, but what it was literally thatched huts. So our rabbis say it in a very interesting way. The rabbi who says that it was the clouds of glory that surrounded us, and that's what we're commemorating, he wants us to celebrate God's greatness and the miracle that God created. The rabbi who said that it wasn't clouds of glory, but it was literally temporary huts like we build now, isn't asking us to celebrate God's greatness. Whose greatness is he asking us to celebrate? What would you say? He's asking us to celebrate our greatness. because we were willing to go into these indefensible temporary dwellings in the middle of a wild desert where there were wild animals, there were snakes, there were wild and hostile bands of men who would ride through and do terrible things to unarmed people. So the rabbi who says that we're celebrating the Jewish people in the huts is talking about the miracle that we created with our extraordinary behavior. A miracle is something that's extraordinary. So when we say that God created a miracle, what we're saying is that he went against the laws of nature to do something absolutely unexpected. God can create a miracle, and the Jewish people can create a miracle as well. When we
What happened?
when we go against the laws of nature, we create the miracle. And what the second rabbi was saying was that we in fact created the miracle, and we're celebrating us. So when you sit at your table on Shabbat, this upcoming Shabbat, ask the question, why are we sitting in a sukkah? Let the children give their opinions, and then say, well, let me tell you what I learned here. I learned that miracles mean extraordinary efforts outside of the laws of nature. And God isn't the only one creating miracles on the planet. The Jewish people can create miracles as well. And we created a miracle by having the gumption, by having the courage to sit in unprotected huts in the middle of a wilderness, of a hostile and dangerous place. So when we go back into, what, Cynthia?
I said, what were the choices?
What were the choices? Good. Right, great. The choice was to panic. The choice was to run away, right? What could we have done? It's a great question. What were the choices?
And it's really
Live in a
true
hut
because
and-
tonight, with the storm outside, my sukkah is
Yeah.
blowing, the rain. I said, wow, we're lucky we can go in the house. But
Right.
what
We
is
had no
Exactly. What were
refuge.
their choices?
Well, we had no choice. We had no refuge. We have no refuge. And you're absolutely right. You could say, to Cynthia's point, it's a great point. Look, there was no refuge. So what are we celebrating?
Celebrating that God gave us this opportunity to be protected in a hut.
Beautiful. So you would go with Rabbi A, who says that we're celebrating what the opportunity that God gave us. And that's great. And the other opinion is that the way we engaged this opportunity is what we're celebrating. So when we're celebrating God's opportunity and we're celebrating our effort. But I love your
Right.
question. What choice did we have? I guess we had a choice. Our rabbis write in the Talmud that we had a choice to push back and to kick the door of the sukkah as we left. You know, that's the cliche that's used to say that we could have rejected it. There's a parable, there's a mashal that says that the other nations of the world asked for the same opportunity that the Jewish people had in the desert. They asked for the same opportunity. And God grants them the opportunity, and they can't take it. They're not happy with it. And one of the nations kicks the door of the sukkah on the way out to demonstrate that he's fed up and he'll have nothing of it. And so, Cynthia, I think what we're celebrating is we didn't leave. We stuck with it. We did it with enthusiasm. We did it with commitment, and we did it to build. And that's the,
But I could add something to that, Ricky.
yeah.
I could add something to that. God in his graciousness, we did what was good for us, but he in turn thanks us for being good enough to accept the gift that he gave us.
Fantastic. I love it. I think that's great. I think that's great. Let's touch on another point. Let's touch on another point. We have this concept that women are exempted from time-bound mitzvot, right? Women are exempted from time-bound mitzvot, right? Everybody's familiar with this, right?
I don't know if I
that
would say it that way, but okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay. So what does it mean? Let's put it in other terms. That if something is time specific, like sitting in a sukkah, then the women have more important things to do. And therefore, hey, Aaron, great to see you.
Hi, Ricky. Sorry, I had 20 minutes to try and get on. It's
I
impossible.
know. We had problems also. I ended up doing it on my phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It took
we had-
20 minutes. I
No,
can't
I'm
believe
I'm
it.
sorry to hear that.
No. I'm
So-
sorry. I insisted.
So we have the perspective that women are exempted from time-bound mitzvot. Now, let's go through this process. And again, Erwin, we're talking about things to share at the table in terms of Sukkot. So
Okay.
let's see how the process goes. A, we have a biblical commandment
You want some
to
Masaman
sit
curry?
in a sukkah. We have a biblical commandment to sit in a sukkah, right?
Right.
We have now the rabbis weigh in and say, we've been given the license, the authority to mitigate those to limit those obligated to this biblical commandment. So the rabbis weigh in on a biblical commandment and say, we're going to limit the number of people obligated to do it because we, in our purview, believe that certain people have more important things to do. So the rabbis weigh in on a biblical commandment of sitting in the sukkah, that when God states it, he states it for everybody, men and women alike. And the rabbis say, but the women are busy and they have more important things to do, and therefore they're exempted. And how do we practice? Women can sit in the sukkah, it's true, but they
Right.
don't have to. They're exempted. So
Wow.
let's go back on this. You have biblical commandments, right? And then you have rabbinic commandments. On the biblical commandments, the rabbis come in and taper them and tailor them to a way to make them as viable as possible. Generally speaking, if a commandment is time specific, women are exempted because their responsibility is to build the family, and building the family and cooking the meals and caring for their children, and these things that sound like mundane things relative to Jewish law are not mundane at all. Now, the important points to know here are A, the time-bound qualifier only applies to a biblical mitzvah. Why? Why would it only apply to a biblical commandment? What do you say? What do you think? It only applies to a biblical commandment. Jen, what do you say?
Practicality for practical? I don't know. Practical. reasons?
Okay, so it applies to a biblical commandment because the rabbinic commandments are fashioned by the rabbis from the outset. So they won't include a constituency that's unrealistic to include. So in a rabbinical law, a law is something that they've designed and developed in order to ultimately bring us closer to the biblical laws. They'll craft it any way they want. So from the outset, they might not include women, or in certain cases, they write up a law just for women and not include men. So you never have the issue of the rabbis having to weigh in on a rabbinic law to say it doesn't apply to women, because they wouldn't have written it to apply to women in the first place if they didn't want it to. You with me? Good?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So something like a sukkah wouldn't apply to women because the rabbis mandated it that way. Good. Let's go with another thing. What if someone took somebody else's sukkah? and sat in it, would he get credit or not? So we
I would
have,
think yes.
well, I'm sorry,
I would think yes.
why?
Because he's still accepting the command. It doesn't tell you what sukkah to sit in.
Fantastic. So let's see. So we have two obligations and we have an overriding criteria. We have an obligation to build a sukkah
Right.
and to sit in a sukkah. We also have the criteria that you can't build a mitzvah on an averah. You can't do something positive based on something negative. So, Cynthia, go back to your answer because your answer was great. I have a commandment to build a sukkah and to sit in a sukkah. I have a commandment not to do something, a positive mitzvah, based on a negative mitzvah. So based on that, which of the commandments would I have fulfilled and which would I have not fulfilled?
I would say that one does not override the other because you could have built a sukkah. There's no proof you did not, and you're sitting in a different sukkah. It does not say you did some averah. That's not an averah.
But what if I stole somebody else's sukkah?
Ah,
Yeah.
that's different. We didn't talk about that.
Okay, so
Right.
talk to me. Talk to me.
Right.
Reuven stole Shimon's sukkah. The Reuven who stole the sukkah has two obligations. One is to build it and one is to sit in it. So did he fulfill either of them or not? Generally speaking, you don't fulfill a mitzvah on an averah. You don't fulfill a mitzvah based on a sin. But did he fulfill
But the
either one in
rabbis
this?
can override that. The rabbis
Huh?
can override that. The rabbis can override that. Just like they could override and put the women in to observe the mitzvah unless she's cooking.
Okay.
The same way they could override. He didn't steal the sukkah. How do you know he stole the sukkah?
We know he stole it. Now, what do you want to do?
So he made an
What do you wanna do?
override. I still think that the override is that he sat in the sukkah, so he fulfilled the second part of the mitzvah. The real part of the mitzvah was to sit in one.
Beautiful. You're absolutely right. He did not fulfill the obligation to build the mitzvah because he stole it, right?
Mhm.
But he did
Yeah.
fulfill the obligation to sit in a sukkah because he sat in one.
Does that override the? does that
No, it
override
didn't have to
the-
override. It didn't
No,
have
is it
to
an
override.
offset?
Huh?
It's a wash.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
what I'm
wash.
saying. Is it an offset? Right.
It's a wash. Now let me ask you a different question. What if he borrowed the sukkah? He borrowed it. Did he
He's
fill his
clear.
obligation? Huh?
He's clear. He's clear.
He's
I
clear.
think it's
Excellent.
the same.
Great.
Yep.
What if he partnered in the sukkah with Jack and Jim partnered in building the sukkah? They own it 50-50.
That's
Did
fine.
he
okay.
get
That's
did he get credit for either or both of the mitzvot?
Yes,
How
because
come?
the desire was the same. The desire
Why?
was the same. The desire was to fulfill the mitzvah. Whether he shared it or not, the desire is to have it done.
Excellent. So the desire, Cynthia, you are on a tear. The desire, you are on a tear. The desire of each of the partners, hey Serene, welcome. The desire of each of the partners was to complete with his partner. Yeah, I don't own my half and you own your half. We desired as partners to collectively create this mitzvah. And therefore, I'm subjugated to you and you're subjugated to me, and we each fulfilled it.
Right. The intent
Right?
is perfect. Yep.
The intent is collaborative.
Ricky,
Right.
Right?
Correct.
Good. Yeah.
I have another, what do you call it, curveball. This is real. I have a sukkah. My neighbors, Hasidic, they go to the mountains for Sukkot. A couple years ago, my neighbor, just him, not him and his wife and his children, came home for 2 nights. I told him he could use my sukkah. Where does he play out in the deal?
Great. So he never built one?
No, he used mine. He didn't have one.
Okay, good. So he doesn't get the mitzvah of building the sukkah, but he
Right.
gets the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah because of your graciousness.
Right, and
Now-
he didn't steal it, so he's covered.
He's covered on sitting, not on building. Now, what
Right.
if, Erwin, you hired somebody because you probably didn't build it yourself? What if you hired somebody else to build it for you? Do you get
Right.
the mitzvah of building the sukkah?
I'd love to know that answer.
So what do you say?
I don't think so.
Huh?
I don't
What do-
think so,
I don't think so
but
because
maybe there's
somebody
a
told,
loophole. I don't know.
Who's
somebody
speaking?
told us, Jeanette,
Yeah, Jeanette,
somebody
yeah.
told,
If it was
so the
up to
other
me, I would
day,
give him the mitzvah.
the other
Yeah.
day, Joey and I were talking about it and we said, let's ask someone in the kollel, maybe they, we'll pay someone. We had a handyman last year to build our sukkah. So we
Uh-huh.
saw a rabbi that we respect and we asked him, what do you think about sending someone to us to help us build the sukkah? He said, I want you to do it yourself. I want you to build it with your boys,
Wow.
Joe, because it's just as important for a man to build the sukkah as a woman is to bake challah. It's just
Right.
as big of a mitzvah. So of course
Wow.
they did it,
Right.
and it was definitely a whole big project, but they enjoyed it. Yeah.
So the last
They
time
enjoyed-
I built
Rabbi
a
you go
sukkah, it was leaning like this.
Oh,
And
forget it. I
was
don't even want to
barely
discuss that.
standing. Right.
But they did it, and it was
Remember that?
beautiful, and we were very
Okay.
proud.
But
So
how much
that-
of a role do you
That's
have
a
to
home
play? Like,
run. Huh?
right.
But what if you can't do that? What if you
No,
can't do
Which
it?
is very true.
Ricky, depends what rabbi she goes to, believe me.
Yeah, that's for sure. But what if you
Sitting
can't
in
do
the-
it? What would you say?
This
I,
happens-
w-
There's,
I want to
there's a,
fulfill the obligation, but I don't know how to build. What do you want
There's
to
a
do?
Go to the synagogue, they have a sukkah, you go to the synagogue.
Okay, one day.
That's
No, I have a sukkah and I hire a guy to build it. How can I
Which is
fulfill
most
the
people.
mitzvah of building it? Come on.
Maybe
Decorate
put
it.
one rod. Maybe we'll do something. Even if you
Exactly.
put one
Exactly.
rod on the top, or just tie.
Or decorate it.
That's right. Or
No,
decorate it.
rabbis-
Exactly. And just
Be a
decorate.
part of it. Be a
Any
part of it.
effort that
Right.
any effort that you
Right.
make is a real effort. So it doesn't
No,
have to be.
it's a great point, because the last couple of years, I strong on one of my sons to come here, and he does like 90% of the work, but I help him, and then,
Right.
So then you built
and
it.
he tells me, Daddy, I could have done it myself.
Right. So you top it off, and you get the
Right.
credit.
Top.
So let's
Right.
recap. In terms of the sukkah, it's deoraita, it's biblical. It starts out as being obligatory to everybody to build and to sit in it, right? The rabbis have their purview when it comes to a biblical mitzvah that they can constrict the application of the mitzvah, right? Mitzvat aseh shazman girama, a time-specific mitzvah criteria only applies to a biblical mitzvah. The rabbis can constrict it. They decide to constrict it because they decide wisely so that a woman's efforts are better spent in the primary area of building their families and preparing for their families, seudot, and so on. Therefore, the men have to build and sit, the women do not. Now, next question. Assuming the woman does not have to sit in the sukkah, based on the qualification that the rabbis have license to bring on a biblical mitzvah, something that's greater than them, but they step up to it and they qualify it. What about the beracha that we say when we sit in the sukkah? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shev b'sukkah. Can a lady say that beracha? No. The answer
I
is
don't
no.
see why not,
No. The answer
Nope.
is she cannot. Cynthia, why?
really.
Serene, why
Really?
can't she say it?
I guess because it's not a mitzvah that we have to do.
Exactly. It's not a
Because
mitzvah
the
that we have to
rabbis
do.
overrode the biblical, the rabbis. overrode it.
Exactly. Excellent. So
women
now,
But I have
Yeah.
a question. So that happened to us on a holiday, and I said, but now how do I fulfill if I want to fulfill the mitzvah? Where do I get the beracha?
fantastic. 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 So you can sit in the sukkah. By sitting in the sukkah, you are fulfilling a mitzvah, but because you're no longer obligated to it, you don't say Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'sivanu, right? Same way. Can a woman take a lulav and shake it? Of course she
No.
can. We don't
But she
do
can.
it. We don't do it.
No.
But can she? Of course she can. By the way, and I'm not making a political statement, and I'm not suggesting anybody do it. We don't do this. But technically speaking, a woman who is in a clean state, can she put on tefillin? And again, I am not suggesting it. We don't do it. Of course, we don't do it. But can she do it?
She
I guess
can.
Of course she can.
There's no,
Of course she can. Do we do it? We don't do it. If she did it, would she do anything wrong? Of course not.
No.
Again, do we do it? No. But would she be doing anything wrong? Of course not. Let's take an even more straightforward example. How many times a day does a woman have to pray?
3.
Once?
Once, right?
Three. Oh.
Once. So is she
I've seen them
allowed to
pray.
pray more than once a day? If she's only, but 1 second, Serene, when she prays more than once a day, she's mentioning God's name a number of times. So, and she's saying, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shomea this.
But it's not deoraita.
Beautiful. It's not a deoraita. Beautiful. And therefore what?
We're not saying that we were commanded to do it, so we're allowed to do it.
We're not saying we were
allowed.
right. We're not saying we were commanded to do it. And even though it's basically recognized that a woman's obligation is 1 time per day, the rabbi's position ultimately is prayer is very personal, it's uplifting, it's reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even though a woman is saying God's name in a prayer that she's not obligated to say, she can say it.
Let me ask you, Ricky, are there many things that the rabbis can override the biblical?
There's anything and everything.
Well,
Oh, wow.
Eh,
So this is-
Anything and everything.
Isn't it the opposite? Like with shofar, it is a time-bound mitzvah, but they decided that the women are obligated, right? So
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. The
but how come we
constriction,
could say we say amen because now we are obligated by the rabbis?
that's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Now, we mentioned this very quickly last time. Let's touch on it again because we're in the zone. What if someone stole a shofar and blew it? Now, we said a few minutes ago that you can't fulfill a mitzvah based on an avedah. Someone stole a shofar and blew it.
But you
And
told us this. You told us this last week.
Yeah, so tell me.
That-
I don't think it's a mitzvah.
Didn't you say the mitzvah was actually to hear it? So it's
Right.
so the
mitzvah
person
is
that's
to hear it. Very good. So we
Not
all
to
say the
blow it.
beracha and we're all yotzei yedei chovah. Very good. Okay, we're going to truncate it. Excellent. Now, what's the main purpose of a Yom Tov? Why do we celebrate Yom Tov? What's the main purpose? Let me give you a little color to the question. Back in the day, in the old days, you'd have thousands of people going up to Jerusalem with their animal sacrifices, with their maaser, the tithe that they came of their grains, with their maaser money, the coins that they brought when they redeemed the grain that had to be separated out to be brought up to Jerusalem. And they came up a few days before Pesach or Sukkot or Shavuot, and they would come into the streets of Jerusalem. What do you think the scene looked like at the time? What did it look like when they got to Jerusalem?
Festive.
It was
People
absolutely festive. And what happened on the day of the Yom Tov? What happened? Did everything shut down?
Yeah, probably.
So really not.
Celebrate? I don't know.
The market was open and people would transact, not with money, but they would transact because you had thousands and thousands of people.
Did he do his last walk? Because
You had thousands of people who needed supplies and other things during the holidays. Hold on. Who needed other things, supplies and other things. So over time, anybody please mute if
I
there's
said
a
him.
noise behind you. Okay,
Shoot, am I not muted?
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, over time, what happened was that the marketplace stayed open. There were no money-based transactions that took place. There were non-money-based transactions, which was fine. The rabbis decreed that the core purpose of the Yom Tov was no longer being kept because the marketplace was open. So they closed the market. Now, what is then the core purpose of Yom Tov? What are the primary things that we want to achieve, let's say next Tuesday and Wednesday? What was the main point? So we understand the main point of the Yom Tov is to study the halachot of that holiday. You have three key things we want to get done. We want to pray. We want to enjoy time with our families based on a festive Seudah. And we want to study the halachot of the holiday. It's very, very important. So here again, men and women, if you have an opportunity, there's a wonderful set of books called The Books of Our Heritage. It's, I think, a 2-volume set in English, and it outlines the background of the holidays and some of the key halachot. There's also, and it's wonderful, there's also the Yalkut Yosef, Yalkut Yosef, that the Saka family from our community translated from Hebrew to English. There are Hebrew-English versions, and there are volumes that talk about the specific holidays. So the purpose of the holiday was to celebrate the relationship with God. How? By building that relationship, by understanding halakha more. So take the opportunity to do so. Let's talk a few minutes about Chol HaMoed. What is Chol HaMoed? Serene, what do you say? What's Chol HaMoed?
The time in between the Yom Tov?
Yeah, and what do we do with it? How do we want to be engaging it? We said that the primary focus of the Yom Tov is family, prayer, and learning the halachot, learning the laws of the holiday. What's the focus of Chol HaMoed? It means the lighter part, or the more mundane part of the holiday. What's the purpose, and how do we engage it? I'm going to give you a few hints. So, should we be doing business on Chol HaMoed in a typical sense? What would you say? What's the halacha on that? What do you do?
And
Not really, right?
So
Not
I'll tell
really.
you, we have an interesting criteria. We're on Shabbat. We constrict people from doing business, of course, but for a situation, an emergency situation, let's say, where there would be a substantial loss to the principle of someone's business, then there are ways to work within the halakha to avoid a substantial loss. It's called hefsed merubeh. And that's the emergency criteria in terms of Shabbat when we can't do anything business related. In terms of Chol HaMoed, it's different. On Chol HaMoed, we say that if it's something davar ha'aved, if there would be an opportunity lost by not doing X, then do it. In other words, it doesn't have to be that there would be a substantial financial loss. The way that the Gemara brings it down is lahachzir et hatanegolet al habetzim, meaning to put the rooster back on her eggs so that the eggs will hatch and not be lost. So even though moving the animal on the holiday is outside the context of the holiday, and we've been considered mukseh, off limits, On Chol Moed, we don't want to sustain even a minor loss, and you're allowed to do it. So for people in business, if there's a transaction, if there's an opportunity, if there's an appointment, that ignoring it or postponing it would result in a missed opportunity, possibly, or davar ha'aved, something that might be lost, then it's okay to do it. Good? Yeah, Serene?
So are you saying maybe like the purpose of Chol HaMoed is to still engage in like your everyday life, but find a way to infuse the holiday and all the halachot while you're still conducting your everyday life? Like it's a challenge.
Exactly. So what are some examples? What would you say are some examples? What would we do on Chol HaMoed?
I guess you could, find a way to sit in the sukkah, in the morning and night, find time to learn, find time to pray, and it's just more of a challenge.
Exactly. You know what we do? We do some trigger things. We dress differently. We try to dress more in a holiday dress than in a Thursday dress on Chol HaMoed. Why? Because it helps create a mindset. So I dress a little differently on Chol HaMoed. Some people have a beautiful minhag where they'll have more bread-based meals on Chol HaMoed, because a bread-based meal is more celebrative. It's usually more, it's a better, more plentiful meal. They'll schedule that extra family time. They'll schedule gatherings and get-togethers. So we want to, and they'll schedule fewer hours in the office, even though they're going to make sure not to lose an important opportunity, but they'll shrink their days and so on. So it becomes a minor celebration. Now, what if you have someone who can't take the time off?
Right.
What if it's a Jewish person working and he or she needs the money, and stopping to work on Chol HaMoed or working less hours on Chol HaMoed would hurt that person financially? Do they have to do so or not?
Right.
What would you say?
I would think they could work.
What, Erwin?
No, Mike, it was really, that was a lead into the question I had was, is there a leniency if someone's employed versus someone that's a principal of a business?
100%, 100%, 100%.
So then in this case, the person has an obligation if the company's not, on the system to allow him to exit or whatever.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. So a Jewish person who needs to work during that time is absolutely allowed to do so. The perspective is, if he doesn't work those days, it'll be harder for him to pay for what he'd like to have in his home to celebrate the upcoming Shabbat or Yom Tov.
Right.
So if it's a Jewish person who doesn't have the opportunity to constrict his time,
Right.
then he shouldn't, and she shouldn't. If he has the opportunity to do so, he certainly should. But a person shouldn't be hurt by it. Yeah.
Right. So Ricky, I don't know how many people, it doesn't matter, but the model of young community members, men and women that work for, say, wealth management firms or banks or financial institutions, they don't have that privilege, but they'll pull down their vacation days or whatever to adhere to the laws.
Great. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's great. So what they may want to do is, plan nightly gatherings. If they have to work all day, even if they can't, switch to vacation days and so on. So make the nights more special. Again, dress a little more, nicely during those days and that kind of thing, to make the distinction clear.
Right.
Now, what if you have people working for you? Let's say a contractor or someone like that. How does that work during Chol HaMoed? Now, what, you know, someone doing a project in your home or something like that, how would that work? So any thoughts, any ideas?
From
So,
what I understand, it's a no-no, but I don't know why.
okay, so let's tease out the what's okay and what's not okay.
Right.
So our rabbis say as follows: if it's something that it demands a high level of specialization or expertise, it shouldn't be done on the holiday. Yeah, you're going to be more engaged. You're going to be more concerned. It's a different level of work. If it can be avoided, it should be avoided during Chol HaMoed. Certainly, we don't want people working on the Yom Tov, but it should be avoided during Chol HaMoed. But if it's something less specialized and the person is coming to do the work, let him do the work. So I'll give you a personal example, and we'll wrap up in 5 minutes. I'll give you a personal example. Last year here in Deal, we hired people to put some new tiles out in the back. And they started working before the holiday. We didn't have them work on Yom Tov. And then he said, you know, I really can't stop this many days. I will if I have to, but can I work in the interim days? I thought about it and I said, you know, what's the big deal in laying a tile? Not that big of a deal, I guess. So I told him, you know what? It's not a maaseh omanut or the work of a specialist. It's more the work of a laborer. And that's where the rabbis distinguish. And they say on Chol HaMoed, don't, if you can avoid it, have the work of a specialist done in your home, but you can have the work of a laborer. And then I watched their work. And I realized I was
I
wrong.
want to ask you. Well,
Yeah.
I would say what the rabbis, I would think, would come up with is if they started before the Chol HaMoed and before the holiday, then they should continue. I don't know if it's right, but that's what I would look at it.
Right.
They started
But
already, so let
yeah.
them finish. It's got nothing
Right.
to do with the holiday.
Right. Okay. In fact, if they have to finish and you don't have a choice and it's Chol HaMoed, okay, you do it. But if they can take the time and go to another job, and the job requires some level of specialization and expertise, it's better to pause the work, because the perspective is if it's more complex for them, it's going to be more demanding on you. And it's going to take your head out of the zone more so than not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? So that's where we balance it. Good?
Right. But that doesn't hold true for business, because in business, it's going to take your head away from the holiday. And,
Right.
you know,
That's
you
right.
are going to be very, very concerned about what you're doing, what you're taking care of in business. That's
Excellent
an
point,
important thing,
Cynthia. Excellent point. So if it's not something that's going to cause me a potential loss by waiting the week, you know, by waiting till after the holiday, then I shouldn't do it. And to go to your point, which is very well said, there's also something called tirha yetera, which means if I have to engage something in business during the holiday, because I don't want to lose out on the opportunity, or because it's not my show, I work here, I don't call the shots here, then do it up to the point that you have to do it and no more. Don't give 110% to the business on these days. I have to do X to fulfill my obligations, not to lose a business opportunity for myself or for my company. Great, do it. But remember, it's still a semi-holiday. And don't do extra. Don't start a new initiative. Unless again.
They don't want you to lose the feeling. Yeah, they don't want you to lose the feeling of the holiday.
Exactly. They don't want you to lose the feeling. That's right. They don't want you to lose the feeling. That's exactly right. So to pull it full circle, We started by saying that Sukkot has more mitzvot than any other holiday, for good reason, because Sukkot is the first round in terms of my renewed relationship with God. I begged and pleaded and committed with enthusiasm and excitement to move my life to another level and build on another level. Now I step beyond Yom Kippur, and I want to demonstrate that I'm doing so. So as I mentioned early on, my first Shabbat should have been different than my previous ones before Kippur. And if it wasn't, these upcoming Shabbatot should be different. And one of the main ways to make them different is to bring a book to the table, open a book of halakha, and read a halakha, and discuss it with your family, and take it on. The holiday of Shabbat, of Sukkot, is filled with so many mitzvot for just that purpose, for me to have the opportunity to take them on. I want to mention one other quick thing. We have the concept of Isru Chag. What does that mean? Isru Chag.
The things we're not allowed to do?
No, the
Yes.
day after the holiday.
Beautiful, Sari. It's a day after the holiday. What is the deal with Isru Chag? What is
It's
it
the
about?
travel day.
It's a travel day. Excellent. And how do we look at it in terms of the holiday itself and doing and not doing? It's very interesting. So I'll give you a quick background. The concept of Isru Chag, of that day after the holiday, started in reference to the holiday of Shavuot only. The holiday of Shavuot in Israel is only one day, right? It's only 2 days here, but it's one day in Israel. So the rabbis speak about this idea that the Jewish people didn't want to leave this sense of holiday that quickly, and would take on the next day, not as a holiday, because you're not allowed to add holidays, but as a day where if someone had a private fast because of something they were concerned about or a bad dream that they had, they wouldn't do it on that day. Over time, we see a reference to it in Sefer Ezra, in the book of Ezra, which is part of the Nevi'im, the prophets, which God willing will be picking back up after the holiday. In the time of Ezra, it started to grow and started to be added on to other holidays. And rather than simply saying that we want to hold on to the holiday of Shavuot, they said, well, we want to hold on to the holiday of Sukkot, and we want to hold on to the holiday of Pesach. And therefore, we're gonna celebrate a little bit on this day. It's not a holiday by any means, but we're oseret. We're imprisoning the holiday in a positive sense. We're holding it. We don't want it to leave. So some Jewish offices, the office that Jamie works in, for example, is closed the day after the holiday because they don't want to bid the holiday farewell that quickly. They want to demonstrate before Hashem the love that they feel for him and the opportunities he provides. And therefore, they want to say, don't leave me. Stay with me. So what do people do? Some people don't work. Nobody will declare a personal fast on the day after the holiday. Some people will do a modified type of Chol HaMoed type behavior where they're working, but they're working on a lesser schedule. So in any case, it evolved as a custom. It's still overwhelmingly a custom, but it's a beautiful thing to say, you know what, God, I'm loving every minute of this. And if we can stay in each other's zones for another 24 hours, even on a more limited basis, let's do it.
Nice.
Something to think about.
Ricky, just a quick question. I know we're time sensitive, but the sleeping in the sukkah, if you could snapshot that, like, where does it come from?
It's one of the most important things a human being can do in his life.
Really?
Period. Why?
Wow.
Tell me why. Tell me why. Come on. One of the most important things a human being can do. Now, are women obligated to do so? No, because again, time specific. Should they
Maybe
try it?
because,
Definitely.
maybe because
Why?
you're really reenacting exactly what we went through as a
Right.
Jewish person.
And therefore what? Great. And therefore
We're
what?
relying directly on Hashem. We're relying.
That's right. And I
We're,
tell you
we're in
something.
the moment. We're in it.
We're in the
We're-
moment, and it is scary. The first 2 nights I slept in the sukkah. Last
Really?
night I didn't, because the wind over here, I went outside and I thought the whole thing I thought it was gonna be like what's that thing, Dorothy? Like
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. It
I'm not
felt
kidding.
like it. It felt like a
That's how I
Dorothy
feel.
moment in the sukkah, you know? But when you're in the sukkah and you have this really makeshift thing, and it goes back to what we
Fly
talked about in the
away.
beginning. What was the more miraculous element? God's actions or ours? I believe ours. And you're lying in that sukkah, and there's lions and tigers and bears out there, or if it's not lions and tigers and bears, it's a possum and a
It's
raccoon
a deer,
and a deer.
a
Yeah.
squirrel,
Wow.
And
bird.
I'll tell you something, it's scary and it's great because you're lying there and you're putting your complete faith in God. Now, I barricaded the door, I did whatever I did, but so what, you know? And it's a fabulous experience. And if you can't pull it off for the whole night, pull it off for part of the night. But there's
Really?
no less of an obligation to eat than to sleep. And I will tell you, it's transformative, it's life-changing,
Wow.
it's
My
inspiring,
kids used
it's
to do that. I
enlightening.
think it's funny.
You put a bed?
I didn't think, I
You're
didn't
not
have a
in
think,
your
bed in your
cozy
sukkah?
bed. You're not.
I have I take a lounge from the backyard. I put it on the sukkah. I put it in the sukkah. I bring a couple pillows and a quilt.
You have a
And
sleeping
that's it.
bag?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
That's
could do a
what they
sleeping
did. They
bag.
wanted to
When
do
we
it.
used to do it in Brooklyn, we did it in sleeping bags. But try it if you can't. By the way, if you can't do it the whole night, do it for a couple of hours. It will
Right.
blow your brains out. I'm telling you. It's a
One
great.
night we had to make the sukkah. The sukkah
Ricky.
went away.
right. So I'm,
No, it's true.
I didn't believe that when I asked the question, it would hit such a nerve, but where does it emanate from? Where does it come from that?
No, it says that you will, the Sukkot teshvu shivat yamim. Everything should be moved into the sukkah. Everything.
Right.
I'm essentially, this class, by the way, I didn't even think of it. Oh, it was storming 10 minutes ago, so wouldn't have worked so well. But everything should be moved into the sukkah.
Right.
And what are the defining elements? Eating, sleeping, and learning, right? Those are really the defining elements, right? If I could
Right.
greet people, by the way, if I invite people over for a drink to have a talk about a chesed project, should be in the sukkah. All that should be in the sukkah. But try the sleeping thing. Try it.
Wow.
We have a couple of more nights we could do it. Telling you, ladies, you're not obligated to. If
Not
you-
tonight, not tonight.
Not tonight,
Tonight is
probably not
miserable.
tonight, but if you can do it even for a couple of hours. 2 nights ago, it poured here in Jersey. So I slept in the bed for a couple of hours, 2:30. I came down, there was one dry-ish lounge, one dry lounge, not it, there was one dry lounge. And I slept on that for 4 hours. It was great. I'm telling you,
Wow.
you will
Thank
be
you, Ricky.
changed
I'm
by
glad
it.
it's going, honey. Thank you.
All right, we're going.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Rick.
you, everybody.
Thank you,
Ricky.
Nice
Thanks,
to
Ricky.
see you. Good
Happy
job.
holiday.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy holiday.